Hello, I'm Philip Brown and I'm going to discuss the question, has Coventry ever declared a climate emergency and does it matter? This podcast is the result of a protest outside Coventry City Council House in late June 2022, which was followed by a noisy meeting of the council inside the council house. I will first consider what it means to declare a climate emergency and also ask the question of whether such a declaration matters. If it doesn't matter, then we don't need to worry about whether the council has declared one or not. In part two, I'll think about whether Coventry City Council has actually declared a climate emergency, and you might think that this is a simple question, yes or no. But in politics, nothing is simple. So, what does it mean to declare a climate emergency? A council can make a declaration by two councillors simply presenting a statement in a council meeting. Such a statement is called a motion in council speak. The other councillors then have to vote to either accept it or reject it. Note that it needs two councillors to support it. This might seem trivial, but we will see it as an important factor in Coventry's climate emergency story. As an example of such a motion, this is the declaration by Warwick District Council. Let me read part of it. Declaring a climate emergency makes it a requirement to take immediate action to drastically reduce carbon emissions. This means the council is now accountable for delivering the requirements of its climate emergency declaration. And the commitments of the declaration are as follows. Being a carbon neutral organisation by 2025, including all contracted out services, facilitating decarbonisation by local businesses, organisations and residents. Note the word residents, in order for Warwick District to be as close to zero as possible by 2030. And a bit further down, there are two commitments which are very relevant to Coventry's story. Engaging with and listening to all relevant stakeholders, including the members of Warwickshire Youth Parliament, regarding approaches to tackling the climate emergency. And a bit further down, producing by November 2019 an action plan to implement these commitments. So that's Warwick District Council's declaration. In the United Kingdom, over 520 councils have declared a climate emergency. Together, these councils are responsible for over 90% of the UK population. They are taking action to reduce their own carbon emissions and working with others to tackle the impact of climate change in the local area. But declaring a climate emergency can also have more immediate effects. On the day of the first global student strike for climate, in March 2019, the United Nations Association Coventry branch organised a student forum inside Coventry Council House, and many of the people who had been protesting outside came in and expressed how they felt. This extract shows one important issue they raised.
Another thing that's a massive issue in schools and institutions as well is there are students like us here that truly care about this stuff and they're passionate enough to come here and voice their opinions, but it's a general theme that there's this massive stigma about being different. And so if you have these beliefs and you have these passions and you voice them, you're suddenly an outsider, you don't fit into the social norms, and you're then written off as somebody who's not socially acceptable, somebody who shouldn't be listened to, and somebody who should be ridiculed. And I think that by forming student councils and student bodies that really push this message and can get it through to everybody else in the school, we can slowly start breaking down this stigma and getting people to voice their true opinions.
And to the governments and to the corporations.
Declaring a climate emergency might help to overcome this stigma. We invited all 54 Coventry councillors to attend. Only one of them, Conservative Councillor Roger Bailey, bothered to find the time. You can see videos of the forum on the UNA Coventry website. The forum produced several ideas which they wanted the council to implement. One was that the city declare a climate emergency. So, in April 2019, I took their proposals to a meeting with the leader of Coventry City Council, Councillor George Duggins, and some other councillors. George Duggins flatly refused to declare a climate emergency. This was in April 2019. And that brings us to the question of whether Coventry has, in fact, declared a climate emergency in the time between then and now. 2 months after my meeting with Councillor George Duggins, another councillor, Councillor Jim O'Boyle, who was then the Cabinet Member for Jobs and Regeneration, moved a motion before the council which was seconded by Councillor Heatherton, and this motion read as follows: This council confirms its commitment to addressing the issue of climate change and recommends the course of action that we are currently undertaking to respond to the climate change emergency. In the 3 years since that time, Councillor O'Boyle has insisted that the city has indeed declared a climate emergency. But does this motion fulfil the criteria for being a declaration of emergency? He used this motion in the council debate on the 21st of June 2022 to prove the council has declared an emergency. However, he clearly fails to understand that any real declaration of a climate emergency, such as that made by Warwick District Council, must include a requirement to produce within a given time an action plan to drastically reduce carbon emissions, and then the council must implement that plan. So where is Coventry's climate action plan, which Councillor O'Boyle says he declared 3 years ago? It does not have one. Coventry does not have a climate action plan. The last action plan, which was produced in 2012, 10 years ago, expired in 2020. Even worse, Councillor O'Boyle's motion does not require a plan to be created at all. On the contrary, it recommends the same course of action that we are already undertaking. In other words, nothing new is needed. This climate emergency makes no difference. My conclusion is that Coventry has never declared a climate emergency and taken the action that such a declaration would entail. Indeed, it has not even got a climate action plan. Far from regarding climate change as an emergency that needs to be fought against, Councillor O'Boyle regards climate change as an opportunity. In 2020, in a message to a Coventry Climate Action Network reporter, which was entitled Coventry, Facing the Challenge of Climate Change and Sustainability as an Opportunity for Future Prosperity, Councillor O'Boyle wrote, "The Council has a major role to play not only in setting an example for others to follow, but mobilising all that live and work in the city to embrace the challenges that climate change and delivering a sustainable future present us. This is not seen as a threat, but more as an opportunity. We have the opportunity to position ourselves as a leading city in a global market." And he wrote this in 2020. Does he really believe that Coventry sets an example to other councils by not declaring a climate emergency, not producing a strategy, not making any difference to its current plans? I don't know what he believes. But I just wonder, how can Councillor O'Boyle get things so wrong? Well, I have some ideas. First of all, Councillor O'Boyle is now the Cabinet Member for Jobs and Regeneration, as he was before, and climate change. He has tagged climate change on his job description, or somebody has. This says it all. Bringing jobs to the city is his top priority. Regeneration of the city is his second priority, and climate change, well, that's at the bottom of his list of priorities. And notice that within Coventry City Council there is no councillor who is responsible for sustainability. Okay, so Coventry has not actually declared a climate emergency. The question is, does it matter? Well, yes it does, because this lack of a declaration reveals several important points about the City Council's attitude to climate change. First, it shows that the man in charge of climate change, Councillor O'Boyle, does not regard it as a problem requiring urgent action. This is shown by the fact that in his motion to the Council he recommended that it continues with the current course of action. That was back in 2020. It is even more clearly shown by the fact that the city still does not have a climate action plan 2 years after the previous plan ended. There is no sense of urgency about Councillor O'Boyle. He spends his time looking for ways to exploit what he sees as an opportunity, rather than seeking ways to reduce an existential threat. Next, it reveals the City Council's lack of communication with its citizens. There are many people in Coventry that want the city to take urgent action, but the Council refuses to speak to them, with the result that there have been several demonstrations and protests demanding that the Council listens to them. Next, because it reveals that Councillor O'Boyle has no idea what it means to declare a climate emergency, he seems to genuinely believe the Council has already declared one. And lastly, it shows that Councillor O'Boyle is happy to work with businesses while he refuses to work with Coventry citizens. He declared in July 2020 that he was going to create a climate change board consisting of senior leaders from organisations across Coventry. No citizens would be allowed to join this board, no climate activists, just those people that Councillor O'Boyle considers to be important. In November 2021, 16 months later, the board was finally set up. Its task will be to help to shape and move forward actions in Coventry to reduce the impact of climate change. But now, as I record this, 8 months later, it has produced nothing. So what should be done about this? I'm afraid that while Jim O'Boyle is in charge of climate change, nothing is going to change except the climate. He is never going to stop claiming he has already declared a climate emergency. His attitude towards the people of Coventry is not going to change. I'm afraid that the solution to the problem of Jim O'Boyle is in the hands of electors. Let's hope they vote in the right way next time.